Hi, I'm Sam,
And I'm Andrew.
and this is Teen Talks Politics. On today's episode, we're covering gun control and gun rights. So, on our first segment, we're going to be talking about the United States compared to other countries with gun control laws and also mass shootings, homicides, and other things. So, yeah. So, we've done a bit of research, and I'm going to put something up on screen. The United States is known to be a bit more lenient on gun owning gun owning. So, like, the United States is the highest rated in the world for owning civilian weapons, right? So the United States beats out countries like Yemen, Serbia, and Lebanon, which is surprising because those a lot of those countries are very unstable, even though we are one of the biggest economies in the world, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
and so how, but we can also tell that gun homicide rates are also higher up because of this. More shootings happen, right? The United
Right.
States triples any other competition. Next up is Israel, and we all know the unstable situation in Israel, but it's triple any other competition. So it's like, what are we gonna do about it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think for us, yes, everyone has a right to a weapon, but later on in this episode, we'll talk about background checks. But I think if we just make background checks a lot more hefty, make it more difficult to get a gun, because New York mayoral candidate, his last name's Adams, I don't remember his first name, but he had a quote. It was like, "It's easier to get a gun in this city than it is to get a vaccine," and that is true in some part because guns, the background check in some states take like 2 minutes or something insane like that, and they can immediately get a gun. So I think the background checks needs to be improved significantly, where it's not only gonna detect your criminal record, but also if you're um, trying to commit suicide or homicide or one of the two terrible things that you can do with a weapon.
Yeah, it's like obviously there's bipartisan support on increasing background checks. Former President Donald Trump has endorsed the idea of increasing background checks, though he's never really provided a plan. Same deal with Biden. I mean, he's been a bit more upfront with this situation, at least in my opinion. I mean,
Yeah.
even though he's got a lot on his hands right now. But so yeah, they both bipartisan support mostly agrees with gun control, especially on the executive level. Um, so it's like, but so what's stopping us from getting this progress done? Like, I mean, I know the gun control has been cemented in American history, and especially I think with much more radical conservatives. I think they think having a gun is their kind of symbol of independence. So it's like, how are we gonna kind of make it easier for people who want a gun to operate one safely? And so, yeah.
And I will mention with the whole idea that everyone has a right to the gun is that the whole reason that it is you're allowed to bear arms is in the Constitution is because back then we didn't have a strong militia, and the whole idea was, okay, if the country doesn't have a military, then the people can act as the military because they have weapons on them. But we have one of the strongest militaries in the entire world, or the strongest military in the entire world. So there's really no reason for us to have to protect ourselves with a weapon.
Yeah, and so it's like a lot of arguments are flawed in this scenario as number one, so people want their guns to protect themselves, even though if other people can get guns and other weapons, it's a lot easier to hurt them. So like, number one, why should the government trust you with a gun if they know there's another chance that a bad guy with a gun could take it, right? And so it's like either we increase background checks or just get rid of this at all. It's like, and it's like, so what? How are we gonna put this plan in action? It's like because like homicide and suicide rates are up recently, so it's like how are we gonna do this, especially in the United States?
Yeah, because there are several states I think have wonderful background checks. Like, for example, in Massachusetts, not only do you have to go through the background check that takes 2 minutes, it looks at your criminal record and stuff, but you also have to wait 3 months. So if you have an idea of, oh, I want to commit suicide, you get 3 months to be like, okay, how about I don't do that? It takes a longer period of time to get a hold of a weapon, which in some states, you don't have to go through that at all, especially in private sales as well.
And bringing it back to like the whole United States compared to other countries situation, I think the United States has the largest homicide gun related incidents reported by far any other country, and we can see the United States is also one of the only countries whose homicide rates are mostly gun related, right?
Yeah.
It's 2 out of 3 homicides are gun related in the United States. So it's kind of but we can take a look at other countries like the United Kingdom and Japan, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have extreme they have a lot. It's a lot harder to get a gun in those countries, and sometimes it's even illegal. But so and also they also are a lot more strict on just any weapon in general. So there is almost no gun-related homicides in the United Kingdom, Japan, and Germany, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's so much harder to get a weapon. While the United States, as we were talking about before, in New York sometimes it's easier to get a gun than a vaccine, right? And so what's the deal? Like why is the United States falling behind in this scenario if we have the information to show that 2 out of 3 homicides are gun related?
And this isn't the first time that the United States has fallen behind on certain issues. For example, slavery was outlawed in Europe and in many countries before America had. The death penalty is outlawed in several first world countries in Europe. It's not in all states in the United States. So this is just another example of we're behind the times at this point. Because America, there needs to be certain guns that need to be legal. Because almost all mass shootings are by, is it an AK-47? I'm pretty sure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Get rid of that gun. Yes, there will be other guns, but it won't be able to shoot as quickly. You won't be able to kill as many people in just seconds. Because you have to reload,
Yep.
I think. I mean, I've never shot a gun, but I'm assuming that's how that is. So I think there's certain guns that need to be outlawed in the United States because these are the guns that are causing most mass shootings. And when are you ever going to need an AK-47? Just think about that. When are you ever going to need to use that?
Why is the United States selling military grade weapons to
Private
people,
citizens,
right? Like
yeah.
it's like okay, number one, why would we need military grade weapons that aren't in the military, right? I'm sure people hunt for pleasure, but you don't need a shotgun or an AK-47 to hunt something, right?
Well, I'm pretty sure you use shotguns for hunting, but yeah, an AK-47 you wouldn't want to use.
Yeah, you don't need military grade weapons to hunt. And so it's like why do people want these things, right? And I think a lot of people believe to kind of flex. I think a lot of toxic masculinity includes having a gun just to, number one, you say it's to protect your family, but I think it's mostly just kind of a show-off situation because who do you think, like, if you have that much trust in the police, right, like, if you have that much trust that police can do their job, then why do you have a gun, right? Like, why do you have a military grade gun? It's like, why?
Yeah.
So, like, all of these shooters can do a lot more damage with with military grade weapons that are being sold to civilians. So,
And that's a good point, right? Because a lot of the people that have these weapons, which, I mean, there are Democrats that have weapons, but a vast majority of them are right-wingers and Republicans. And these are the same people that are back the blue, right? And these back the blue people, they trust the police. They're like, don't defund the police. But then they don't trust the police enough to not have to protect themselves. They don't trust the police enough to protect them. So they think they need a weapon like a gun to protect themselves when are you actually going to need to use the gun? Like I was asking before, like when are you going to need to use an AK-47? There's not going to be many scenarios where you're going to need it. If no one has guns, no one can attack you with a gun, right?
Yeah,
Remove
exactly.
guns
So
out
it
of the
just
equation completely.
Yeah, so it brings around this absurdity of this situation in the United States. And while we're talking about military grade weapons at shootings, we can talk about school shootings. And as teenagers, it's kind of depressing to know that we are drilled twice a year, at least in our school system, on what to do if a shooter enters the building. We are told to hide, run. Like we were shown these instructional videos. It's like, why do we need to know this stuff, right? Like, and it's so common, and so it's like, this is kind of depressing that we have to learn this stuff, not the government, and many people are getting killed.
And at least in North Carolina, they're called lockdown drills. And like you said before, the thing is you hide under desks, you hide in a corner so the person in the building that has this weapon can't come into the classroom and basically try to kill or hurt somebody. And the fact that we have to do that at all is sad. Like there used to be drills in schools for like nuclear weapons during the Cold War. I don't remember what it was called. Of course, we don't have that anymore. But of course, you do it when you have to in that period of time, and in that period of time, there was a threat of nuclear war. And I think if we get over this hurdle with gun homicides and school shootings, we don't have to do lockdown drills anymore. So like I said, we just remove guns out of the equation completely. And the NRA has this quote, only thing to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. But the thing is, what if no one has guns, right? A bad guy can't hurt you, and you can't hurt them back, at least with a gun.
Yeah, if no one has these weapons, if the only people that have these weapons are the police, then even if someone tried to assault someone with maybe a makeshift thing, I don't think a makeshift shank will do against an armed trained police officer. So and so I think if we could number one make it safer for the everyday civilian, and so you can make it safer for the everyday civilian, and also we could compromise with the right by saying that the police still have the power, right? Which we can talk about police brutality in another episode, right? But yeah, so it's like there's a way to compensate, but I don't think the right really wants to budge, right? Like,
well, I mean, you were saying earlier that it's a bipartisan thing where Trump supports background checks, and so does the president, right? Mm-hmm. For example, like Pat Toomey, you know him, senator from Pennsylvania, he supports background checks, and he's a Republican.
Yeah, but the only thing is they endorse it, but they don't put any plans in motion. Without this bipartisan support,
he had a bill, and he grouped with Joe Manchin for this bill. Mm-hmm. But it didn't. But is it bipartisan? Attention.
Yeah. Is it bipartisan support if only a few people of each party votes for it? Like, right? Like if like maybe one person's able to step forward, okay, that's great. But it's like it's not bipartisan support if no one else does, right?
Well, it depends.
You know what I mean. You know what I mean.
It depends on how you define that, because if it has positions that both parties stand on it, but only one party votes for it, you could consider that being bipartisan because it has Republican ideologies in that bill, but no Republican votes for it. So it depends. If you consider bipartisanship,
it definitely depends.
If you consider bipartisanship as everybody votes for it, both parties vote for it equally, then okay, that's definitely bipartisan. But if you just consider it as, okay, there's Republican ideologies in this bill, it's bipartisan. It depends on how you look at it.
Yeah, I agree with that. But back to the topic. Why, like, It's like, so we need to get these motions in place, but what's stopping it? The NRA and other organizations have like on a rock solid place, right? They aren't gonna budge because of this long history of
Well,
they're not going to budge because of America's long history with guns.
well, you should
And so
think about it. Like, where does it, from their point of view, what's going to help them as a company? They're going to make more
Yeah.
money if more guns are sold. If they start telling people don't buy guns, they're going to lose money. So it's
Yeah.
just from a business point of view
Yeah.
of what's going to help them basically get rich.
Yeah.
It's all about money.
And they're spreading this ideology of it's like an age-old tradition that Americans need guns. So
And a lot
and
of
so
people
when
believe
they're
that.
able to and so when they cement that, it's harder for other people to do that. And so yeah, I think we just covered our school shooting and a good guy and a bad guy with a gun.
Well, if I just one more thing to point out, and if the NRA gets their way, like I think it was 3 years after the, no, not 3 years. It was right after the Parkland shooting. NRA was saying, okay, how about you give every teacher a firearm, and
Yeah.
that's their quote. Oh, only thing to stop a bad guy with a gun in terms of the shooter at the school, and then a good guy with a gun, which would be the teacher. That does not work. Because what if the teacher doesn't know how to use a gun? What if the teacher gets mad and is basically off a rocker and shoots the student? Because we don't know what the guns are going to be used for.
Yeah, it's like, and it's also, what would we give the teachers? Would we give them a military grade weapon to fight another military grade weapon? Like, either way, someone's gonna get hurt, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, whether that be the good guy or the bad guy.
What
It's
if what if the teacher
Yeah.
mistakes someone for being a bad guy and shoots
Yeah.
this person and kills them?
Yeah, it's like, okay, so we can either take so we could take the teacher and the shooter, right? We have a scenario and these both people have the NRA's support, right? So they have the teacher has a gun, which is like let's go with a AK-47, and so does the shooter. The shooter also has an AK-47. Now, the teacher's probably a bit less experienced because they don't really need guns and they don't really use guns. So there's like there's a good chance that the teacher will die from that, right? And
Mhm.
so that's a casualty lost for a good guy. And then for a good guy, and then at the same time, but we could have just had a situation where this didn't happen, where no one got hurt because no one needed a gun.
And another thing with the teacher having a gun is, what if they don't know how to use it correctly? And
Yeah,
they
that's
kill
what I was kind of-
themselves. Like,
Yeah.
not the shooter killing them because they can't fire quick enough or they're not experienced, but also if they accidentally backfire the pistol or whatever gun they're
Yeah.
using.
There's way too much liabilities.
There's too much
with-
liability for the teacher and basically the students as well.
Yeah. Okay, so now on to our next subject is mass shootings. This is kind of similar to our previous story, but it's, again, like as we were talking about military grade weapons in civilian hands. So, got any thoughts?
Well, so the mass shootings, there's one almost every day at this point. Like, it was the last day of school, I get a notification there's been a mass shooting in Florida. Okay, a day before it was a mass shooting in Texas. There was a mass shooting in Colorado. So almost every day there's like a new mass shooting. And like I said before, it's almost always an AK-47. Because they shoot very fast, they can kill
Yeah.
a mass amount of people at one time. Because, like I said, they shoot very fast. And just in general, like we said before, background checks is key in making sure that the people that want to commit mass shootings don't get hold of these guns. And like we said before, this is a bipartisan thing. It's just whether or not someone can write a bill and whether Republicans will go out of their way not to make their party look better than Democrats, but to actually do something for the American people, which they have not been prioritizing as lately.
Yeah. So, yeah, with like mass shootings, it's like why do we need civilians with military grade weapons? Like, why do we need civilians with killing machines if they only need a gun for defending their household. If since we're on a podcast, I'll remind you I'm putting air quotes in the air. So it's like, so these people, right? It's much easier to get a gun if everyone agrees. Well, not everyone, but if the government agrees at the time that the only way to stop a good guy with a gun is a bad guy with a gun.
Yeah, and that's just a marketing slogan to sell two guns. Like we were talking right before this podcast, I'm like, this is exactly what they're trying to do, to sell two guns. Okay, we can sell one person to the bad guy, and then you can basically make double the money. Because like I said before, that's all they care about. It's all driven by what they can make, about how much money they can make.
So, yeah. And so we're gonna... So, yeah, it's just kind of insane that these mass shootings happen consistently. So, it's like... So, yeah. It's like...
And I will say that every mass shooting is driven by something else. Whether or not the shooter is not right in the head, whether or not they're driven to target a certain person and then end up killing other people in the process.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But they're all driven by something else. You know?
Yeah, it's like that's why background checks are so important, so that people can know, like, if they know that you're not safe enough to operate a gun, if you've had previous history with bad use of guns, and if they can kind of know your intentions.
Yeah, and that's, like you said, that's a good reason for these background checks to take a long time. So if you have that urge to commit suicide or target someone else, you can you have that time to mull over that idea and basically just stop about it. Not decide to do it after 3 months once you actually get hold of the firearm.
Yeah, it's like, and that brings us, and bringing it around, we don't need these military grade guns to be sold, because I bet you 9 times out of 10, these people aren't buying these military grade guns for defending their household. They're either buying it to flex off to their friends about how cool and strong they are with these massive military guns, or they're sadly trying to hurt someone with them. So there's no reason to have these military grade guns other than to hurt people or to really just flex off. And why should flexing how cool you are have to hurt people, right? Like how does having, like, I'd certainly rather not have a gun that I could flex in order to save someone from being hurt.
Well, that's not necessarily the sole reason. Like you said, I think a majority of people don't actually have it just to this quote flex, basically. I think a lot of people truly believe that's going to protect them. But just think about this. Okay, so you are in a scenario, you have a gun, and you're like in a purse, basically, okay? Someone's trying to attack you. You know how long it's going to take you to grab that gun and reload it and everything? You're not going to have time to react. So to think that that gun's going to save your life is unlikely unless you have several seconds to be able to react, get your gun, load it. So I just think in general, to have these, not just military grade weapons, but literally any weapon of like a firearm, I think it's just unnecessary because people think that it's going to help them. You're not going to have time to help yourself with the gun. And if you do have time, you're probably not going to be helping anybody but yourself survive.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, and so it's like we could have prevented this entire scenario in the first place by the oppressor not having any guns.
Yes, and that's a good point. Alright, so we're almost done with this episode. We do want to mention that the New York mayoral election The primary
Yep.
is going to be Tuesday night, so when this gets uploaded. So if you live in New York, just make sure you vote because
Yep.
it's good to have your
Polls-
voices
yeah,
heard.
Voting closes at 9 p.m. So get out there. It's a very influential election.
Because
So yeah.
biggest city in the country. So
Yeah.
make sure you go out vote and have a good day.
Yep. This is Team Talks Politics. Talk to you later.
Tune in for the next episode.
Yep.